the Sutras on Self-Realization, or Atma Bodha. I am composing the Atma Bodha, or self-knowledge, to serve the needs of those who have been purified through the practice of austerities, and who are peaceful in heart, free from cravings, and desirous of liberation. As fire is the direct cause of cooking, so knowledge, and not any other form of discipline, is the direct cause of liberation. For liberation cannot be attained without knowledge. Action cannot destroy ignorance, for it is not in conflict with ignorance. Knowledge alone destroys ignorance, as light destroys dense darkness. It is only because of ignorance that the self appears to be finite. When ignorance is destroyed, the real self, which does not admit any multiplicity whatsoever, truly reveals itself by itself, like the sun when the cloud is removed. Through repeated practice, knowledge purifies the embodied soul stained by ignorance, and then itself disappears, just as the powder of the kataka nut disappears after it has cleansed muddy water. The world, filled with attachments and aversions, and the rest, is like a dream. It appears to be real as long as one is ignorant, but becomes unreal when one is awake. The world appears to be real as long as the non-dual Brahman, which is the basis of all, is not known. It is like the illusion of silver in an oyster shell. All the various forms exist in the imagination of the perceiver, the substratum being the eternal and all-pervading Vishnu, whose nature is existence and intelligence. Names and forms are like bangles and bracelets. Vishnu is like gold. As the all-pervading space appears to be diverse on account of its association with various things, which are different from each other, becomes one on the destruction of these things, so also the omnipresent Lord appears to be diverse on account of his association with various upadhis, and becomes one on the destruction of these. Owing to its association with various upadhis, such ideas as caste, color, and position are superimposed on Atman, as flavor, color, and so forth on water. The gross body, the medium through which the soul experiences pleasure and pain, is determined by past action and formed out of the 5 great subtle elements, which become gross when 1/2 portion of one subtle element becomes united with 1/8 of each of the other 4. The subtle body, the instrument of the soul's experience, consists of the 5 pranas, the 10 organs, the manas, and the buddhi, all formed from the rudimentary elements before their subdivision and combination with one another. Avidya, or ignorance, indescribable and beginningless, is called the cause, which is an upadhi superimposed on Atman. Know for certain that Atman is other than the 3 upadhis. On account of union with the 5 sheaths, The pure Atman appears to be like them, as in the case with a crystal, which appears to be endowed with such colors as blue or red when in contact with the blue or red cloth. One should, through discrimination, separate the pure and inmost self from the sheaths by which it is covered, as one separates a rice kernel from the covering husk by striking it with a pestle. Though all-pervading, the soul does not shine in everything. It is manifest only in the buddhi or intellect, like a reflection in a clear water on a stainless mirror. Realize Atman to be distinct from the body, distinct from the sense organs, the mind, the intellect, and non-differentiated prakriti, but the witness of their functions, comparable to a king. As the moon appears to be moving when the clouds move in the sky, so also to the non-discriminating, the soul appears to be active, when in reality the senses are active. The body, senses, mind, and intellect engage in their respective activities with the help of consciousness, which is inherent in the soul, just as men work with the help of the light that is inherent in the sun. Fools, through non-discrimination, superimpose on the stainless self, which is existence and consciousness absolute, they superimpose the characteristics and functions of the body and the senses, just as people attribute such traits as blueness and concavity to the sky. As the movement that belongs to water is attributed through ignorance to the moon reflected in it, so also agency, enjoyment, and other limitations which belong to the mind are falsely attributed to the soul. Attachment, desire, pleasure, pain, and the rest are perceived to exist as long as the intellect or the mind functions. They are not perceived in deep sleep when the mind ceases to exist. Therefore, they belong to the mind and not to the Atman. The nature of Atman, or self, is eternity, purity, reality, consciousness, and bliss, just as luminosity is the nature of the sun, coolness is the nature of water, and heat the nature of fire. Such a notion as I know is produced by the union, due to non-discrimination, of a modification of the mind with two aspects of Atman, namely existence and consciousness. Atman never undergoes change, and the buddhi is never endowed with consciousness. But man believes his self to be identical with the intellect, and falls under such delusions as that he is the seer and the knower. The soul, regarding itself as a jiva, is overcome by fear, just like the man who regards a rope as a snake. The soul regains fearlessness by realizing that it is not a jiva, but the supreme soul. The mind, the sense organs, and so on, are illumined by the soul alone, as a jar or pot is by a lamp. But these material objects cannot illumine their own self. As a lighted lamp does not need another lamp to manifest its light, so the Atman, being consciousness itself, does not need another instrument of consciousness to illumine itself. By negating all the upadhis through the help of the scriptural statement, not this, realize the oneness of the individual soul and the Supreme Soul by means of the great Vedic aphorisms. The body and so on, created by ignorance and of the nature of an object, are perishable, like bubbles. Realize through discrimination and discernment that you are the stainless Brahman, completely different from them. I am free from changes such as birth, thinness, senility, and death, for I am other than the body. I am unattached to the objects of the senses, such as sound and taste, for I am without sense organs. I am free from sorrow, attachment, malice, and fear, for I am other than the mind. He is without breath and without mind, pure, higher than the high, and imperishable. From it are born breath, mind, and all organs of the sense, ether, air, light, water, and earth, which is the support of all. I am without attributes and action, eternal and pure, free from stain and desire, changeless and formless, always free. I fill all things, inside and out, like the ether, changeless and the same in all. I am pure, unattached, stainless, and immutable. I am verily that supreme Brahman, which is eternal, stainless, and free, which is one, indivisible, and non-dual, which is of the nature of bliss, truth, knowledge, and infinity. The impression of I am Brahman, thus created by the uninterrupted reflection, destroys ignorance and its distractions, as medicine destroys diseases. Sitting in a solitary place, freeing the mind from desires, and controlling the senses, meditate with unswerving attention on the infinite soul, which is one, without a second. The wise one should intelligently merge the entire objective world in the Atman, and constantly think of Atman as the stainless sky. He who has attained the supreme goal discards all such objects as name and form, and dwells as the embodiment of infinite consciousness and bliss. The Supreme Self, on account of its being of the nature of exceeding bliss, does not admit of the distinction of the knower, knowledge, and object of knowledge. It alone shines. By constant meditation, comparable to the rubbing of the firewood, is kindled the flame of knowledge, which completely burns up the fuel of ignorance. As the sun appears after the destruction of darkness by dawn, so the Atman appears after the destruction of ignorance by knowledge. Though the Atman is ever-present reality, yet because of ignorance it is unrealized. On the destruction of ignorance, the Atman is realized, It is like the case of the ornament on one's neck. Brahman appears to be a jiva through ignorance, as the stump of a tree appears to be a man in the dark. This jivahood is destroyed when the real nature of the jiva is realized. The knowledge produced by the realization of the true nature of reality destroys immediately the ignorance characterized by the notions of me and mine, just as the sun destroys the mistake regarding one's direction. The yogi endowed with complete enlightenment sees, through the eye of knowledge, the entire universe in his own self, and regards everything as the self, and nothing else. The tangible universe is verily the self. Nothing whatsoever exists that is other than the self. As pots and jars are verily clay, and cannot be anything but clay, so to the enlightened, all that is perceived is the self. A jivan mukta endowed with self-knowledge gives up the traits of his previous upadhis. Because of his realization that he is of the nature of existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute, he verily becomes God, like the cockroach becoming a Brahmara insect. A yogi who is a jivan mukta, after crossing the ocean of delusion and killing the monsters of passion and aversion, becomes united with peace and dwells in the bliss derived from the realization of the self. Relinquishing attachment to illusory and external happiness, the self-abiding jivan mukta, satisfied with the bliss derived from God, shines inwardly like a lamp placed inside a jar. Though associated with upadhis, he, the contemplative one, is undefiled by their traits, like the sky, and he remains unaltered under all conditions, like a dumb person. He moves about unattached, like the wind. On the destruction of the upadhis, he, the contemplative one, is totally absorbed in Vishnu, the all-pervading spirit, like water in water, space in space, and light in light. Realize that to be Brahman, the attainment of which leaves nothing more to be attained, the blessedness of which leaves no other bliss to be desired, and the knowledge of which leaves nothing more to be known. Realize that to be Brahman, which, when seen, leaves nothing more to be seen, having become which one is not born again into the world of becoming, and which, when known, leaves nothing else to be known. Realize that to be Brahman, which is existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute, which is non-dual and infinite, eternal and one, and which fills all the quarters, all that is above and below, and all that exists between. Realize that to be Brahman, which is non-dual, indivisible, one, and blissful, and which is indicated by Vedanta as the irreducible substratum after the negation of all tangible objects. Deities like Brahma and Indra taste only a particle of the unlimited bliss of Brahman and enjoy in proportion their shares of that particle. All objects are pervaded by Brahman. All actions are possible because of Brahman. Therefore, Brahman permeates everything, as milk permeates butter. Realize that to be Brahman, which is neither subtle nor gross, neither short nor long, without birth and change, without form, qualities, or color. Realize that to be Brahman, by the light of which luminous orbs like the sun and moon are illumined, but which cannot be illumined by their light, and by which everything is illumined. The Supreme Brahman pervades the entire universe outwardly and inwardly, and shines of itself, like the fire that permeates a red-hot iron ball, both inwardly and outwardly, and shines of itself. Brahman is other than the universe. There exists nothing that is not Brahman. If any object other than Brahman appears to exist, it is unreal, like a mirage. All that is perceived, all that is heard, is Brahman, and nothing else. Attaining the knowledge of reality, one sees the universe as the non-dual Brahman, existence, knowledge, bliss. Though Atman is reality and consciousness, and ever present everywhere, yet it is perceived by the eye of wisdom alone. But one whose vision is obscured by ignorance does not see the radiant Atman, as the blind do not see the resplendent sun. The jiva, free from impurities, being well heated in the fire of knowledge, kindled by hearing and so on, shines of himself like gold. The Atman, which is the sun of knowledge, arises in the firmament of the heart and destroys the darkness. The pervader of all and the sustainer of all, it illumines all and also itself. He who, renouncing all activities, worships in the sacred and stainless shrine of the Atman, which is independent of time, place, and distance, which is present everywhere, which is the destroyer of heat and cold and the other opposites, and which is the giver of eternal happiness, becomes all-knowing and all-pervading, and attains hereafter immortality.